Got it. I'd love to see the recording when it's done.
Yeah,
Definitely
so
share
just
that.
wanted to put a disclaimer out there that this meeting is going to be recorded and it's going to be distributed to our networks. And with that being said, I just wanted to welcome everyone and thank you for joining this afternoon. And a special thank you to our panelists, Molly Reynolds, who is the program manager at Gather 55, and Mark Bittman, who is the founder of Community Kitchen. And we're excited to hear their experiences. There's been a slight adjustment to the program since Mark does have to sign off at 12:30. So we're going to move our kind of contacts introductions to the end of it and just kind of jump right in with Mark. I also wanted to do a quick thank you to Ali Giorsi from the Foodshed Network, who organized and coordinated these Pay What You Can community conversations. It's been such a great process to work with her and Meg and Sally throughout this. And finally, this webinar is a collaboration with the Eastern Connecticut Regional Food System Partnership and the Connecticut Food System Alliance. And so we'll get more into detail at the end. So with that being said, Mark, could you just kind of give us a quick overview of your project? And then Meg has a couple follow-up questions for you.
I mean, I will make it quick because to the extent anyone wants to know about this, it's all sort of out there and been out there. I started fantasizing about something like this many years ago, but during COVID, when I was trying to figure out what to do if I wasn't going to be a journalist anymore, which I had sort of decided, I just started thinking about what the term good food might mean if it were well defined. And none of this is news to anyone here, but I thought great agriculture with farmers treated well and being paid what they deserve to be paid, and land distributed to people who wanted to farm, and minimal impact on the environment, labor treating well and being paid real living wages all up and down the food chain. You all know that 7 of the 10 worst paying jobs in the United States are in food, so that's a big issue. Great food, healthy food, nutritious food, and so on. In a way, that's the easy part, but of course it doesn't happen very often. And then a sliding scale, making that food available to everybody at prices dependent on income. So it doesn't take a genius to know that the reason this doesn't happen is because it's a money loser, and everything in the food system, almost everything in the food system right now, is geared toward making money. And if you said, what should a food system look like? It might be the way I just described it, but that's not what our food system looks like. Our food system looks like a profit-making machine where big farmers make money, little farmers don't. The environment is ignored. Workers are paid terribly. The food poisons us and makes us sick. And to the extent that there is good food, only people with lots of money can afford it. So I started to think, how could I do something different? What might be interesting? And I thought of, well, we could do and as it happens, it's not a complete coincidence. As it happens, my partner runs a food-based nonprofit, a food-centered nonprofit. So I was finding myself in more and more of these conversations anyway. And I just thought, why not do a nonprofit restaurant that would do all of those things right, candidly lose money, candidly lose lots of money, and set up as a model in a couple of different places to say, if the food system were to serve people the way that it should, this is one aspect of one way it might look. So 2 years ago, I started working with students and interns and so on, and started doing some research, and then raised a little money from a couple of foundations and private individuals, just enough to sort of keep it going. I don't pay myself. And over the summer, finished this deck, which I'm happy to share with anybody who wants to see it if you haven't seen it already. Finished the deck, finished the sort of financial spreadsheets and all of this stuff, which if any of you have ever done financial projections, what they're worth, but people like to see them. But just justified, here's why we're going to lose 65 cents for every dollar we bring in, or that is lose $1.65 for every dollar we bring in. Started looking at locations and so on. And then since Labor Day, I've been trying to raise big money. The intention is to raise a couple of $1 million initially. And I've been meeting with people in communities, or not even really on the community level yet, let's say municipalities or areas where I think this might be possible. So I've targeted northern New York City. I live north of New York City, so these are part of this is just geographical self-interest. So northern New York City and southern Westchester, which is where the population centers in Westchester are. I spent some time talking to people and looking at places in the upper Hudson Valley, in Western Massachusetts, Northampton and Holyoke in particular, in central Massachusetts, Worcester in particular, in New Haven, where I lived for many, many years. But ultimately just decided, and really, again, this is just geographical, it's just practical. I need to be within 2 hours of where I live, and I need to be moving towards New York City, where I spend a lot of time anyway, rather than moving away from it. And furthermore, this really is intended to be a model, and a model that I, and eventually we, when there's a team, will help people with anywhere and doing elsewhere. So in fact, I'm talking to some people in Omaha who are trying to set up a similar operation, and I'm helping them. And last week heard from a guy in Boise who also wants to do something similar, and he and I are setting up a series of phone calls. So let's see, the fundraising is going slowly. All of you who've done fundraising know that's how it usually goes. I'm a little frustrated by that, in part because I don't really know what I'm doing, and I rely on phone calls with people who've had experience doing it, telling me what I'm doing right and what I'm doing wrong, although I'm not sure there's a lot to be said about that. And location-wise, I've had really good conversations with people in a couple of parts of the Bronx, in Washington Heights, and now I've talked to some people in Westchester, but I now have much more promising meetings set up in Yonkers, New Rochelle, Portchester, and Ossining. And the sort of qualifications in Westchester, or the things that I've set up as being paramount in Westchester, are towns that have a real population center, good public transportation that is downtown near the Metro North line, because everything in Westchester is on Metro North, which, if any of you don't know, is one of the New York suburban train lines. A diverse community, easy access to the city and western, especially western suburbs, New Jersey and the rest of Westchester. So I'm just trying to think if I've left anything important out. I think the other thing is that I have long thought that these were going to be the first two steps, that I can't. Community kitchen is a working name, but of course working names have ways of sticking. But to the extent that there is community here, and the aim is to bring people of different income levels and different races together over food in ways that they usually don't come together over food, that's one of the goals. I want and need the support of whatever communities this winds up being in, not just support, involvement. This is not a one-person operation. It has been until this point, mostly a one-person operation. But a year from now, when we have money, I'd like to see me be more in the background and be of use to whoever's running this thing than having me be running this thing. So there was that Guardian piece, which a lot of people saw. And since then, I've been speaking to many groups around the country about this stuff. So I have a little experience doing that, but anyway, I'm open to any conversation you want to have. I didn't intend to take half our time with me talking, but there you go.
No, thank you so much. That's a great overview. You covered some of the questions that I wanted to get into. You alluded to this a little bit, but I'm interested in what are the relationships that you're building as part of this? I know in New York City, there's a lot of local sourcing and urban farm operations going on, but what are the types of relationships that you're trying to develop for this project?
I just have to take a bread out of the oven. Give me 1 second.
Yeah.
Always happens.
So folks, we get to speak with Mark until about 12:30 and we'll do some questions at the end of the conversation. But here's
it's easy to start with politicians and municipalities and existing food pantries, food banks, et cetera, but and that's all well and good. I'm looking to try to ally with community organizers, with faith-based groups, with community-based groups that are or aren't not necessarily focused on food, but focused on community. So that's the tricky part, is that because it is a restaurant, because my name is so closely associated with food, people sort of want to steer me into this. I don't really see this as a restaurant project. I see it as a nonprofit, a sort of, here's how the food system, one aspect of the food system might look if things were done well. But as soon as I start talking to people, I'm not saying you're doing this, but many people just go to the place of, oh, Mark Bittman's starting a restaurant chain and they want to sell me real estate. So there's this kind of, how do I get to, the youth organizations, the faith-based organizations, the place-based organizations, the group of Latinx citizens that's doing organizing and support work, the group of Catholics that are organizing in a community, or African Americans that are doing community stuff. So that's been the sort of more challenging thing, but I don't know how to do it other than to go through the people it's easiest to meet. And it's easiest to meet the city council person or the person in charge of the food bank or even the mayor or city manager. These are not huge towns. It was actually easier to meet the Bronx borough president, than it is to meet a group of Latinx people organizing an X neighborhood, because I am, after all, an outsider. So those are the meetings I'm endeavoring to make happen now, and they've proven to be harder than I thought they would, but I'm not discouraged. That stuff is going to happen. I'm not giving up. And the things that are happening in Washington Heights right now are especially encouraging, not because it's that unusual, but just because the things that I thought would happen are starting to happen. There's a childhood advocacy group that's opening a new center. It's going to have a place to do SNAP applications. It's going to be based above a food pantry. It's going to have WIC stuff there. It's going to have a health clinic. It may have the kind of kitchen that's open to anyone to go cook in, and may even have ingredients there, and so on and so on. And they want to ally with me around this. So that's the kind of thing I'm hoping happens in other places.
Those are really exciting. I'm really glad to see you making those types of connections for the local food system and with community organizations in particular. You've touched on this a little bit. I was just wondering if you could expand a little bit on how you plan to embody equity in your program. This is really based around how the food system is inequitable. So if you could expand on that a little bit.
I think a lot of this is an opportunity to talk and to educate. I can say that we're going to preferentially we're going to preferentially source from farmers of color, queer farmers, generally marginalized farmers, and so on. But and it's true, we will preferentially do that. I mean, and in the Hudson Valley, that's doable. There are lots of those kinds of farmers, and I know many of them, and they're into this. So that's sort of okay. That doesn't get land into the hands of new farmers, which is a real equity question, and into the hands of more farmers of color. But at least there's an opportunity to talk about that. So, and I'm open to any idea that anything we can do when we become an organization to work in that direction, I'll be happy about. The other equity stuff is, who do we hire? And there's talk about, do we have a training program? Do we hire formerly incarcerated people? Do we hire people just out of high school who don't have the skills they need? Or how does that work? And I think that question is open to discussion. And then I think the providing good food to people regardless of income sort of speaks from itself from an equity perspective. There are a lot of questions to answer about how you do a sliding scale in a way that, how you do a really nice restaurant with a sliding scale in a way that doesn't chase away poor people and doesn't chase away rich people, but attracts both in sort of semi-equal numbers, so that the thing winds up looking like my vision, but maybe it doesn't wind up looking like my vision. Maybe there's something different, but the whole system of what, not so much pay what you can or pay what you want, but pay what you're able. And there's a standard for that. I mean, it doesn't have to be that complicated, but there's a standard for paying what you're able. And you only have to, in my view, you only have to declare what income bracket you're in once, and then you're there. In a way that's like SNAP. I mean, you don't have to re-qualify for SNAP every time you go use food stamps. So, or go use your SNAP card, I should say. So some of these things are thorny and complicated, but I do, some of them won't be figured out in advance. They'll be figured out either through practice or at least through teams of people, some of whom know more about given subjects than any one of us do or I do. So not everything can be answered at this point, but certainly the equity issues are kind of top line.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. That's front and center. I think with the remaining time that we have with you, Mark, I'd love to open it up for questions. One question that we have in the chat is from Vitavia. She just wants to know what the center in Washington Heights is called, with the food pantry and the community services.
The organization's called Chalk, and I can't remember what it stands for. And the principal is Dodie Myers. But it's early days, but we've had interesting conversations with them. The physical structure exists, although it's unlikely that if we're affiliated with them, it's not only unlikely, it's impossible the community kitchen would be in their physical structure, not because it's too small, because it's actually quite large, but because the whole ground floor is taken up by West Side Campaign Against Hunger, which is one of the food banks in the city, one of the big food banks in the city, and also because it's on a side street. And if you want a restaurant to attract off the street foot traffic, then there's a street around the corner that's just much more of an urban center, much busier, really a retail center with subway stops and zillions of stores and food trucks and blah blah blah. So much better location, but the affiliation is super valuable if that happens.
Mm-hmm. Great. Yeah, so I'll include some information about that organization in our follow-up. Are there any other questions from the attendees? There's one in here from Beth. about other models for pay what you can. I don't know about any that would be outside the US. I know that the partnership did some research on this that we can share with the group afterwards if you're interested in that. But if there are any other questions from the group for Mark.
I mean, I'd like to see that. I'd like to see the research you've done on other models.
Absolutely.
We all know that there are pay what you can restaurants. There are restaurants that have made attempts to pay workers well. There are restaurants that do good sourcing. There are restaurants that make good food, obviously. I don't know of one that's done all four of these things and survived. I think in part, they haven't been as clear as they might have been about the need to say that they're nonprofits and are going to lose money, actively lose money. So be in a permanent state of fundraising, I think. Edward Lee and Lindsay O'Fasick, who were on my podcast a week or two ago, you can listen to that anytime you want. It's Food with Mark Bittman, are setting up a nonprofit restaurant in probably Washington or Louisville. Well, I actually don't know because they spend their time in Louisville, but for some reason I had the idea it was going to be in Washington. Anyway, they have very, very, very focused aims. So good treatment of labor, good sourcing, women-led, but they're not talking about sliding. They have, as when I say very specific aims, besides those, they want to do an all-electric kitchen, no gas. They want to do no single-use plastic, not only in their kitchen, but from any of their suppliers, which is a big thing. They have two or three more than that. They have a few very specific goals that are all really interesting and admirable. And they also say it's a 5-year project. So it's more of a, I don't want to put words in their mouth, but it's a very much of a data mining project in a way, or here are specific goals. What can we do? I think my idea is a little more broad, or maybe I just don't. There's those sort of four major things: the farming environment aspect, the labor aspect, the nutrition aspect, and the sliding scale aspect are all so big and so challenging that to talk about working with formerly incarcerated people or building a women-led organization. I think all of that is possible, and I kind of take it for granted, but there's this kind of, I want to kind of get the thing started, and those four issues are challenging enough than to start trying to present in a minute or two, which is what you usually have when you talk to people, to start talking about different levels of equity or who's being treated preferentially and who's not. And I mean, it's pretty clear in my mind, but it's hard to just talk about every single little thing. Like single-use plastic, such a great idea. I think it's such a powerful idea, but I don't want to elevate issues like that to the same issue as sort of the same level as sort of overall equity, or even, let's just say, making well-grown food available to people of all incomes while treating workers well at the same time. You know, that's a one-sentence thing that says so much and is such a huge challenge that if you then put in, oh, and by the way, we're not going to use single-use plastics, or we're going to have an all-electric kitchen, it just seems to sort of, not that it dilutes the message, but it just complicates things.
Yeah. I know you have to go soon. I'm curious because we have this conversation in nonprofits all the time, even with funders wanting to know, when will this be sustainable? When will you not need grant funds for this? So just your whole concept of this not making money, I'm just kind of interested in how you're framing that, how you're talking about that aspect of it when you're looking for funding.
Well, this is why I wish we had more time, and maybe we need to rescheduled because it's a really long conversation. And of course, yes, I get that question all the time. And my answer is there's only going to be 2 of these. I only want to do 2 of these. Anyone else can do 50. It's fine with me. I'll help, but I only want to try to start this. And the funds are not they're not extravagant. They're not over the moon. They're in the single or double digit millions of dollars over 5 years. I will say that it's a model that, as I've said a couple of times, but I'll just say again, it's a model that shows how things might be done right if the food system might be done right in one aspect of the food system, if the food system were organized for people's benefit instead of for profit. And that if that's what you want things to look like, if that's what people in the United States want things to look like, then we have to, in the long term, think about it the way we think about transportation and education and communication and utilities and healthcare and the military and so on, and say this is a government program. Feeding people well in the United States is not going to happen by itself. If you let anarchy reign, then it's going to become run by big food and big pharma and big chemical and big ag and so on, as it is now. And if you want to change that, you have to change that by making it a cabinet level department that says all Americans have the right to nutritious food, and this is how it's going to happen. That's obviously a mouthful and I have to run, but to me, that's the long-term plan. I don't expect to live to see that, but people will.
I think that's a great way to end this, a huge, huge ask and transition in our food system. Mark, thank you so much for the time that you could spend with us today.
I wish I had more time, and good luck to all of you. I look forward to looking at the rest of the recording, and we'll be in touch.
Thank you so much. All right. Have a good afternoon.
Take care. Bye all.
Bye-bye. All right. Well, thank you to our attendees. Again, we're going to be transitioning to talk with Molly Reynolds, who is the program manager of the Gather 55 Cafe at Hands on Hartford. So Molly, I'm going to turn it over to you to just give us an overview of your program, and then you can start in with the discussion questions with Sydney. So take it away, Molly.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Yeah, so Hands on Hartford, which is a 54-year-old nonprofit, a little more than a year ago, opened what we initially called a pay what you can restaurant during the daytime. And then in the evening, we have a more traditional, tablecloth restaurant with different guest chefs every month. Pretty much Connecticut's best chefs donate their time. And it looks like a regular restaurant, although many of the people who dine there aren't paying for their meal. They can make a reservation with us, and it's a special occasion thing. It's not like our daytime restaurant where you can come every day if you want. But I say this by way of just letting you know, we actually have 2 different restaurants under the name Gather 55, which can be a little confusing for people. Our daytime model, as I said, it started out as a pay what you can restaurant. This kind of grew out of the fact that we'd had a soup kitchen in downtown Hartford for 40 years. COVID hit, the church it was housed in closed. The soup kitchen had to move to our location in the Parkville neighborhood of Hartford, which happened to have a big commercial kitchen. So we were able to seamlessly bring them over. We also were running a cafe at that time, just a regular kind of traditional cafe where people came and got breakfast and lunch. So for a little bit of time, we were actually running the soup kitchen and the cafe out of the same kitchen. We had to close the cafe because in COVID, we just kind of lost our customer base. We decided to keep the soup kitchen here. But started thinking about reopening the cafe. We knew we wanted to do that. We are sort of there aren't a lot of places to eat in Parkville, and we really wanted to make sure there was a place where people could come. So when we were thinking about reopening, we thought, is there a way we could do both? Could we combine the soup kitchen with a cafe? and started doing research. Kind of the most well-known one, at least to us, was Project John Bon Jovi has in New Jersey, which is a pay what you can cafe. We went and visited that. We've worked with a really well-run organization in Raleigh, North Carolina, A Place at the Table. My children live in Denver, which allowed me to visit another one in Denver called Same, which was really the first of these pay what you can restaurants. And those restaurants all include volunteering as a piece of their model. It's not just coming to the door and saying, well, I can pay this much or I can't pay anything. It's coming to the door and knowing there's a minimum price. Here it's $2 or it's $1 for children. But if you can't pay that, you can volunteer for half an hour. And there are a few folks who we have on a list who we also have a day center and a homeless outreach program. So we're aware of people in the community who really aren't in a place to do either one, and we will give them a voucher. We don't want people going away hungry, but we very intentionally made the change to a restaurant. So we're no longer a soup kitchen. And, you know, we have a full menu. People can select what they want to eat. It was a big shift for us to sort of add this volunteer component. And we did it after last summer when we were having 400 people a day show up for the first go round, which was the pay what you can restaurant. And it was unsustainable for us. And we needed to put some sort of mechanism in to just keep it at numbers that we could handle. And going to this participation model seemed like a good way for us to do that. And we did that knowing there are other soup kitchens in Hartford. So there were still options for folks if that's what they needed. And for us, it was a shift from a one-way street, which is how we saw a soup kitchen, to a two-way street, where everyone who comes is part of the community by way of their participation. Our goal is to have about 60% of our daytime diners be dining with us through that participation model, and 40% of them being full pay customers, because we want, sort of as Mark was talking about, that balance of diners. If you know, you don't, it's really the mission of the restaurant is to harness the power of delicious food to connect communities. And it's really, really, that's why our name is Gather 55. It's about gathering people. And it's that way in the daytime and also in the evening. You know, our sort of, if people are choosing to dine with us in the evening, they could go to any number of nice restaurants, and they'll probably be spending time with people who are very much like them. If they come to our restaurant, they'll be spending time with a variety of people, and still having a delicious meal. So that's sort of the overview of what we're doing. It's still a work in progress. We also have a day center embedded within the restaurant. So there are some folks who come and kind of just spend the day with us. We offer services. Today, Hartford Hospital is here running a health clinic. So it's more than just a restaurant. There's a lot more going on. And also in our building, we have a food pantry that last month served 930 households. So we're not just serving people through the restaurant. There are other ways that Hands on Hartford as an organization is feeding the community.
Thank you for that. So thinking about, in your overview, you mentioned doing a lot of research and visiting other locations and stuff. I was curious about what kind of research did you guys do within the community to kind of identify this need for that? And what relationships and networks did you build through that process?
Well, we talked to our, at that time, who were our current guests. We did a lot of research within the people who came to our soup kitchen to find out what they thought of this change in model. And they were all 100% in favor of it. And we continue to do surveys with our guests. And all of them are, by and large, really positive. In terms of community partners, sort of outside the city, we certainly worked with, like I saw Lewis is here from Foodshare, Foodshare, for example, agencies that help us access food. We are also kind of like Mark, we're always going to be fundraising to keep this going. We're not going to run it as a profit-making restaurant. That's not the point of what this is. Our hope is that the evening restaurant will generate some revenue that we can feed into our daytime program.
And have you started to see some of that happen in the time that you've been open and moving towards that way, the evening restaurant kind of helping support?
Not yet. We need more diners. We actually this is very exciting for us because we're a nonprofit organization that sort of, said, hey, let's open a restaurant, sort of like, hey, let's put on a show. And none of us really had expertise in restaurant management. And we've just hired Rob Mafucci, who's been a restaurateur in the Hartford area and around Connecticut for 30 years and really knows his stuff, and he loves the mission. And I have to say, it's kind of a relief to have someone who really understands the restaurant end of things. We understand the serving the community part of things, but we know that in order for this to be sustainable, we do have to run it like a restaurant.
Yeah. And so obviously you have to run a business basically, but there's also this huge underlying mission there, which is what we really want to incorporate into our work as well. And so for you, what does equity within the food system mean, and how are you guys making sure that gets embodied in your programming as you are becoming more efficient?
Yeah. So when we talk about Gather 55, I have my little mantra that we're a community of diners, donors, and doers. And that all three of those, as a three-legged stool, we need all three of those equally involved in the restaurant. So we need all of our diners who come here day and evening, our doers who are our volunteers. And it's really interesting watching volunteering in this restaurant. We have the spontaneous volunteers who are the folks who show up and volunteer for half an hour, as well as a lot of just sort of community members who like volunteering here because they like what we're doing, they like the mission. And everyone wears the same apron. When whoever comes in volunteers, they just put on an apron. And we really noticed, especially with the folks who used to come to our day center, that they love putting on the apron. It is a sort of tangible way to feel like I'm a part of this community and I am able to give as much as I am able to receive. And it's been very transformative for some people.
Thank you. And so one of our last questions is about how this work is really focusing on integrating our divergent food systems, the commodity and charity. And so if you could speak a little bit about the values of this work, and again, the balance of economically viable and really providing a service to the community. I know you've mentioned this a lot, but yeah.
Yeah, so economically viable really depends on the donor part of my three-legged stool. And, we get that in a variety of ways. We have individuals who really like what we're doing and will donate when they just come here to eat. And none of our staff receive tips. They're all paid within our nonprofit wage structure, and they're paid a good wage. We pay well above minimum wage, even for the, lowest level job. So particularly in the evening restaurant, we do have a 20% service charge, but where the tip line is, it says donation. And we always talk to our evening diners about our mission, and people really love it. And they love, coming here to dine and knowing that they'll get a great meal, and they can, not only by buying the food, but they can make a donation above and beyond. They can support what we're doing during the daytime. If we didn't have donors, we would not exist. We absolutely have to have them. And, some of the donors are our volunteers, these folks in the community who come every week. We have one woman who is amazing at arranging flowers. So we would not normally have a nice thing like flowers in our restaurant because it would be kind of too expensive and like, well, that's nice, but can we really do it? But because we have this volunteer and that's what she loves and she's fantastic at it, we have beautiful flowers in the evening. So just having people who can do these little things and find a way to plug in that's meaningful for them is part of creating that community that can support the restaurant, that will hopefully keep it viable.
Absolutely. Thank you. This is more of a personal question, I guess, then I'm going off script here a little bit. But when you're talking about building the relationships, you mentioned like partnering with Foodshare and sourcing and stuff. I was wondering what your guys' relationships are with local farmers, community gardens, those kind of programs.
So not so much. We don't, we've always kind of sourced food from traditional, restaurants, Restaurant Depot, HPC, that sort of thing. Our food pantry is much more in that area of receiving food from local purveyors and that sort of thing. And I know they participate in a grant program where they're getting lots of produce from local providers, from Connecticut providers, but not in the restaurant. And it's a little tricky because we charge for our food. We're not able to receive or participate in some of those food programs in that way. For example, we used to get actual money from or support from Foodshare when it was a soup kitchen, because there was no money exchanging hands. Now that people pay us, even if it's a nominal fee, we are no longer able to do that in that same way. But Foodshare does support us in other ways. Like, there's some tricky things once you make the shift from a soup kitchen to a restaurant.
Yeah, interesting. Thank you.
But I also want to mention too, I'd be remiss if I didn't point out the participation of all these for our evening restaurant chefs in Connecticut who've stepped up. We have a different guest chef every month. This has been spearheaded by Tyler Anderson, who's, he's a big chef in Connecticut, and he's invited many of his friends to participate, which has really been kind of fun, and it keeps our menu fresh. We're actually going to be putting out a cookbook, so each of the chefs can be highlighted with the food they offered to the restaurant, and that, hopefully will create a little revenue too.
Oh, I love that. Okay. So do you have any other final thoughts you'd like to ask? We're going to move into kind of step back and do the introduction we were planning on starting with. And then I think we're going to leave time for questions.
Invite you all to come and dine with us. It's a wonderful experience, day or evening. They're two really different restaurants. The day is lively, it's vibrant, it's loud, but it's a great community space. People are very kind to one another, and then our evening is a little more subdued. It's like just a very nice restaurant in a beautiful space with fantastic food.
Yeah. Okay. So to backtrack a little bit and to give some context to why we're all here today, this webinar series is one of the results of our Rooting Deep and Scaling Up project, which has been made possible by the USDA's Regional Food System Partnership Grant. And so over the past 2 years, we've been convening stakeholders in the state to identify ways to strengthen Eastern Connecticut's food system. So this is Windham County, New London County, and kind of all the communities that touch it. So Mansfield, Willington. And the core mission of our work was to be able to increase economic viability for farmers and also equitable access for fresh food to individuals, particularly low-income consumers. During the first year, the Rooting Deep, we did intensive community surveying and interviews with producers, consumers, retailers, and emergency food providers throughout the region. And we compiled all of these results into a landscape assessment where we identified some recurring needs and opportunities to improve our food system. And after we published that last December-ish, in year 2, we did the scaling up portion of our project. So the partnership broke into these working groups around all the leverage points identified in year 1 to try to develop projects that can really tangibly meet these needs. You can find a list of all of these partners that participated in this planning process on the invitation that was sent out. But overall, we believe right now that we're currently operating in 2 different food systems. There's this emergency food system space, and then there's also this foodie farmers market kind of high-end space as well. And we really see this pay what you can models as a chance to bridge the gap between these 2 spaces, where those who can afford to pay more can offset the price for those who normally wouldn't be able to afford it, while also removing that financial burden from the farmer. Oftentimes, when we're trying to talk about increasing access to low-income consumers of local food, the burden falls on the farmers to feel obligated to donate their produce or something. And so we want to kind of remove that as well and use these 2 systems to support each other. We knew that this wasn't an original idea, though, and there were many organizations already doing this work. So rather than reinventing the wheel, we developed this series with CFSA and the Foodshed Network to kind of bring together those already working in these models to educate us on the success and challenges of operating them as we try to begin our journey of building this in Eastern Connecticut. And this is just the first of one of the series where we kind of focused on the cafes. We will be hosting another one in November where we'll be looking at more of a grocery store models. And so we're hoping people can join us for that again. And now I'm going to hand it over to Meg so she can talk about how CFSA kind of fits into all of this work as well.
Yeah, and I'll do that just briefly. And thanks again for hanging on through our adjusted agenda here today. And we'll get right back to questions so that we can get into discussion with Molly again. The Connecticut Food System Alliance, we are running a network of food system actors in the state with a goal of creating a more just and sustainable food system. We're actually partners on 2 of the USDA Regional Food Systems partnerships. So this Eastern Connecticut partnership, but we're also looking at the regional aspect through the New England Feeding New England partnership. And we do our work by creating opportunities and connections between the different food system actors in the state with the goal of developing a food action plan that would help us align our goals around sustainable food production and just and equitable food system employment and local food sourcing for Connecticut. I do want to turn it back to the subject of our webinar today, which is the Pay What You Can restaurant model. And we do have a question from Leah about how this type of restaurant model might be replicated. And if so, how do we avoid putting the pressure on nonprofits to carry the fundraising piece? I think that we went over this a little bit with Mark. It sounds like they want to do no more than 2 of these restaurants, although he wants to be involved in and supporting or inspiring replication elsewhere. Molly, would you want to talk a little bit about the pressure on the fundraising piece?
It's big. There's no denying it. And I think, and I hope we can get to this place in Hartford, where we're located, of really the community seeing this as a big asset, that there's no other restaurant like this. And to really, as a community, say this is something we value, we want to support. A place at the table, which was the similar cafe I mentioned from Raleigh, North Carolina, that we've worked with. They have really been able to leverage corporate support. The corporations in Raleigh-Durham area just like what they're doing, and they have sponsors. We don't have sponsors of the restaurant. I think, that's one way to get there, is identifying individuals or groups who just believe in the mission and are happy to have their name associated with it, and who offer financial support.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from the group? Are you looking to partner with any other community organizations, and what would you be looking for in a partnership? Thank you. Mrs. Lee.
That's a good question. I think we've only been open a little more than a year, and we're sort of still kind of getting our footing on what we're doing. We still kind of tweaking our model here and there. We kind of come up against, is this working? And then adjust. I think that the partnering with other organizations is just, and we do it to some extent, like if there are organizations who we know are out there working with sort of our most marginalized folks, or people who are living on the streets, we've given vouchers to those organizations so they can give them to individuals they're aware of who might need to come in and get a meal with us. Larger scale, I haven't really even thought about that.
Thank you. Do we have other questions from the group?
I will say that Hands On Hartford as an organization does partner with a lot of organizations in Hartford. We're part of something known as the Culinary Collaborative. So we partner with, and it's sort of a mix of profit and nonprofit. Like we partner with the Parkville Market, which is down the street from us. They're a very successful for-profit food hall. We partner with Reset, who works with small businesses to help them grow and sustain and learn. We partner with Forge City Works. We partner with Knox. They used to be Knox Parks. Now they're just called Narcs, which is urban farming. And we partner with the Swift Factory in Hartford. They're in the north part of Hartford. And they create spaces for sort of makers. They've got kitchen spaces. We also run a shared kitchen here. When we're not running the restaurant, in our very busy kitchen, we support 45 small food businesses who can rent time in the kitchen on an hourly basis. So that kitchen is busy 24/7.
Yeah, I think that aspect of your program is really, really interesting, because you're getting to foster all these different businesses that you can integrate into your model in different ways.
And we do sell some products in our daytime cafe that are made by our shared kitchen members. So we, if there's a way to highlight them, we certainly like to do that.
Yeah, awesome. What have been some of the unexpected or big challenges with Gather 55?
Well, many challenges. If anybody's ever tried to open a restaurant, it's challenging under the best of circumstances with, all the resources in the world and all the knowledge in the world. It's just, there's always challenges. There's things that come up. We're really lucky. We've got a great team. people have really banded together and worked hard. And I'd say it's a huge credit to Hands on Hartford as an organization for saying, yes, let's take this leap of faith. Let's do something bold and different and open a restaurant, even though, on the face of it, we don't look like the type of entity that should be running a restaurant. But given its mission and the connecting of communities and the connecting of volunteers, we've always been an organization that has a main emphasis has been involving volunteers, if not here at Hands on Hartford, connecting them to other volunteer opportunities in the region. So that's been a really nice way to live into that volunteer model.
Thank you. Just trying to keep an eye on the chat. So does the restaurant have any resources to support marketing?
Well, we have a very small marketing budget, which we try to use judiciously. We do a lot of social media because social media is free. We have fantastic restaurant reviews. So we, do have reviews in Open Table and Yelp and Google. And the Yelp and Open Table, we do pay them a little money to get them boosted so that if you're looking to go out to dinner, you'll see us first or early in the list. But yeah, it's a challenge because we don't have a budget for it.
Mm-hmm.
Or much of a budget.
Yeah, thank you. Are there other questions from the group? One of the questions I had, what are some of I guess this is a little bit more of an off-topic question, but what are some of the most important changes that you think we can make in the food system to see more work like Gather 55, more of that connecting work going on, and just kind of get
oh my gosh. Well, and I was listening to Mark talk, and he has, just this whole soup to nuts view of, let's start with the farmer and take it all the way to the people serving the food and the people dining, and make sure there's equity all along the path. I was just thinking, oh my gosh, that is such a huge undertaking. It just involves so many subsets and different groups with their own little sub ecosystems. And I thought, it was interesting to hear the comment, it should be a cabinet level department to figure it all out. I mean, I think it takes a huge shift in mindset to do that.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
So because it's so hard at the top, I think you have to do these things at the bottom. So, I think this is an example of it. There are, other small little community-based organizations doing similar things. And then, just build it that way. People really need to support places that are doing different things, whether it's at a restaurant, whether it's at a farmer's market, whatever that space might be.
Yeah. Thank you. Are there more questions from the group? Thank you so much, Molly. This has been a really great discussion. I wish we had an opportunity to have more of a popcorn with you and Mark, but this has been an awesome explanation of your programming and
well, it was my pleasure, and I'm gonna get Mark up here to visit Gather 55.
Yeah, that would be great. Do you want to share anything about what you have planned next at Gather 55? Any updates?
Well, coming November, we always have our first guest chef in the evening on the first Wednesday of the month, and November 1st, Tyler Anderson, who's really been our partner and our chef partner, and is coming back. And so for those who don't know, he's an excellent chef. He's leaving his restaurant he's just opened in Kent, which just was named a top 50 restaurant in the US. So, you know, he's a busy person who cares a lot about what we're doing and makes the time to be a part of this.
Awesome.
So come on November 1st, you can make reservations on Open Table, and it's always fun.
That's great. I really hope I can check it out soon, and hope everybody here can get there as well.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Molly. Oh yeah.
Okay.
Michelle says
Bye-bye.
group trip. We could organize.
And you can come day or evening. Daytime is Monday through Thursday, and the evening is Wednesday through Saturday.
Okay. Awesome.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. We did have this scheduled
Thank you.
till 1:30. If there are other if you have other questions, either for Mark or Molly, we can relay them and try to include them in our follow-up. We will be sharing this recording with you after today and some of the talking points. But thank you so much for being part of this conversation with us. I think that there's just some really interesting new ways of looking at food work that are really important, that are going on both in Hartford and in New York. So that's been really exciting. Allie or Sydney, if you want to add anything else, I just want to thank you both for working on this. It's been great to organize and great to have these conversations. So is there anything else that Allie or Sydney that you'd like to add?
I just want to say thank you to everyone for coming. And I hope you'll be able to join us for the next one in November. We should have an invite and registration link out soon.
Yeah, thank you.
That's November 20th at 7 p.m.
Yes. And so we'll have another Hartford program. Forge City Works will be here, and somebody from Wild Ramp in West Virginia, is that right? As a grocery store. So that's what we've got going on next. Thanks so much for being here, and we'll talk soon. All right, bye.